I told you the media we intake manipulates the way that we think about race and culture. You might say, Ms. Valle, I choose how I think, not the media. You're right, mostly. Let's have a quick lesson on media literacy. Simply put, media literacy is the ability to see media, such as movies, TV, news, radio, books, etc., and interpret their meanings and messages. All media we participate in is created by somebody who has their own thoughts and ideas. Even if they are trying to be unbiased, their individual perspectives and experiences will color their work. Additionally, our own experiences will color the way that we interpret media. Let's see if we can make this a little clearer. Imagine your mom texts you saying that your dad has just been hit by a drunk driver. He's okay, but your whole family is really shook up. A few days later, your friends post a picture of them holding up red Solo cups with the hashtags Party for Life and YOLO. For you, because of your experiences, this post is not cool, and it might even rub you the wrong way. However, for the rest of your friends that just had a great party, this photo is a way for them to remember it happily. Based on your individual experiences, the idea of drinking at a party and you only live once seems pretty dangerous and even stupid. But for your friends, this seems like a great way to have some fun. Your different perspectives and experiences will determine the way that you look at this post, as well as the stuff you decide to post. So what does this have to do with media telling you what to think? Well, a lot of media makers have specific goals in mind when they make a thing. For example, somebody making a Nike commercial is trying to get you to buy Nike tennis shoes. Or with a movie perhaps, they want you to be so drawn in by the trailer that you'll pay to see it in theaters. They also want the movie to be entertaining enough that you'll recommend it to your friends as well. Perhaps the goal isn't purely economic, however. Maybe a writer of a book simply wants you to learn from their characters' experiences that friendship is powerful, or kindness is king. Even if the goal seems harmless, the maker behind the media is trying to communicate something, convince you, and in some cases get you to do something, and we should be aware of that. This is where media literacy comes in. Being able to understand the goals, messages, and themes behind the media we participate in can help us stop being passive consumers and become active partakers. We can better learn to decode the messages that media makers are encoding in their work, and when we learn to do that successfully, we can do something about it. So back to the first idea. Media manipulates the way we see race and culture. Let's start with a little exercise. In 1 minute, you can pause this video. Make a list of all of the movies you have seen that have a person of color as the main character. How many were you able to list? Was it under 5 or less than 10? If you were able to list more than this, you did better than I did. When I first tried this, I could only think of 6 or so movies off of the top of my head before I had to start researching films. And I'm someone who studies film a lot. Next, pick one of those films you wrote down and make a list of what that movie taught you about that person's culture or race. This can be specific personality traits of the character or broader cultural definitions. Take a minute or so to do this as well. So what did you write down? One of the movies that first came to my mind was Disney's Pocahontas. When I was a kid, this was one of my favorite movies. There was a strong female protagonist who didn't need anybody to save her, plus the music was beautiful. She taught me to follow my heart and stand up for what I believe in. But Pocahontas also taught me a lot of other things, mostly without me realizing it. It taught me that Native Americans are proud and noble. It showed me that they wore brown animal skin clothing with feathers in their hair. I was taught that Native Americans have a deep connection with the earth and can even communicate with it. I learned that European settlers, while at first misunderstanding the Native Americans, eventually became quite amicable with them. And finally, I was taught that Pocahontas was not only brave and strong, but also a mature woman who chose her path of love. So the things I learned about Native American people in this movie weren't that bad, right? It's a children's movie with a happy ending, right? Well, if we take a look at the real history of Pocahontas, we'll find that not only have we been misled by Disney's version, but we've also been fed a lot of stereotypes. The relationship between the Native Americans and the European settlers of Jamestown was actually a lot more complex. Native American culture, especially across different tribes, is a lot more nuanced than what we see in the movie, and a lot of movies about them for that matter. And to top it off, Pocahontas wasn't her real name, and she wasn't a strong and mature woman. she was an 11 to 12-year-old girl caught in the violent colonization of America by white European settlers. Likely, if you do a little bit more digging about the races or cultures depicted in the movies you've listed, you'll find that media tends to rely a lot on stereotypes and generalizations. Film theorists Ella Shohat and Robert Stam, in their essay about representation, realism, and stereotypes in film, state, filmic fictions inevitably bring into play real-life assumptions not only about space and time, but also about social and cultural relationships. Films, which represent marginalized culture in a realistic mode, even when they do not claim to represent specific historical incidents, still implicitly make factual claims. Thus, critics are right to draw attention to the complacent ignorance of Hollywood portrayals of Native Americans, and many other cultures for that matter. Not only are these stereotypes harmful to the races and cultures that they simplify, but to all of us as a society. Progression and harmony require understanding and empathy. So what can you do as a viewer and potentially a maker of media yourself? Our friends Ella and Robert come in with a couple of suggestions. 1. Find out what the people who belong to the culture being depicted are saying. Before watching a film that depicts a different culture than your own, do a little research about it. What are the people in those communities saying about the film? How do they feel about this representation of their culture? Do they support it, or are they protesting it? 2. If you find that a representation of a certain culture in a piece of media is unfair or incorrect, don't participate in it. Critical spectators can thus exert pressure on distribution and exhibition, and even affect subsequent productions. While such pressure does not guarantee sympathetic representations, it does at least mean that aggressively hurtful portrayals will not go unchallenged. 3. If you are making media involving other cultures other than your own, do your research. Consult as many experts and participants in that culture as possible to get a variety of perspectives and experiences. Also, involve people of that culture in as much of the production as possible. Let's say you want to make a movie about a Latino immigrant. Invite a Latino immigrant to help you work on the script. Hire Latino immigrants to help you with the filming, production design, music composition, and even advertising. And most importantly, for your Latino immigrant characters, cast Latino immigrants. 4th, one final idea, and perhaps the most accessible for a novice media maker, is something called remix. Once a piece of media is read, processed, and understood, it can be remixed by reworking it, re-editing it, and perhaps even remaking it so that it more accurately reflects a nuanced reality. Let's take our previous example of Pocahontas to test this out. I could remix Disney's film by perhaps rewriting the dialogue to better reflect her real history. Or perhaps I could take several still images from the movie and redraw them to be more culturally accurate. Maybe I could edit in real footage of Powhatan people in place of the stereotyped animated versions of them. Does this give you some ideas? Hopefully, now you can be more aware of the racial and cultural representations in the media you participate in. Perhaps you can start to be an advocate for positive change and more fair representation. In your own work, I would encourage you to be culturally sensitive and stay away from stereotypes or generalizations of any kind. So try one of these ideas out. Next time you go to a movie about a different culture than your own, see what the people of that culture are saying about it. Help stop racist and insensitive representations in media by not giving it your support. Make a piece of media in collaboration with someone of a different culture, or remix an existing work of media. Let's work together to bring to light more diverse and nuanced stories and stop justifying those that aren't. Make the world better with justice and harmony through your empathy and understanding. So media makers, get out there and get to work.